The Cutting Edge is very proud to be with one of America's great heroes. And of course, all heroes don't think they're heroes, and that's kind of real attractive. But anyway, Walt Ehlers, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Kansas.
Well, tell us what town. Is that by Lawrence or where?
Junction City, Kansas.
Junction City, Kansas.
Manhattan.
Now, you were born in the 20s, were you?
Born in May the 7th, 1921.
And what was it like growing up in Kansas in those days?
Well, it was, well, the first 10 years of my life was pretty nice because I was very young, you know, and my dad was very prosperous on the farm at that time.
What kind of crops did you have there?
Well, he had all kinds of crops. You know, we called it a self-sufficient farm. You know, in other words, we raised our wheat and our oats and our hay and our alfalfa and all this kind of stuff. This and we had fruit and vegetables, and we had our own gardens and potatoes and things like that.
So growing up in the 30s in Kansas with a farm was a pretty good thing during those Depression years then.
Like I say, well, the first 10 years was fine until my dad bought a farm in 1929. But the first 10 years he was doing real well because sometimes he was probably making about $10,000 a year. In those days, it's almost unheard of, you know.
Oh, that was a lot of money. Did your mom, was she a stay-at-home mom?
Oh yes, she was. She had to be. She has 3 boys and 3 girls. Of course, my brother Ron was the first one born, and then my brother Klaus, and then myself, and then my sister Leona, and then Marge, and then Gloria.
Now, how many?
Born in 1929.
So tell us, how many of those siblings have you got are still around with you?
All except my brother.
Is that right? Boy, you got some longevity there in the Ehlers family, huh?
Right.
Now, are you from German extraction, or what are you, know?
I'm from German and Irish.
German and Irish.
Irish side, and my dad's the German side.
So what did you do when you went to high school there in Grand Junction, Kansas? And your older brother was with you, and then what was going on in the world in 1940 that made you decide to go in the service of our country?
You know, I went to high school from 1936 through 1940, and the first 3 years of my high school, I stayed with my grandfather Ehlers because it was close to Junction City, Kansas, and we lived out on a farm and happened to be living in Riley County at that time, and my older brother, by the way, he was working, and so he paid our tuition to go to that school. And so we stayed with our grandfather, and of course he took care of us there, and we went 3 years to Junction City High School. And while we were staying there, of course, he's the only one in the family that had a radio, and he was a very successful farmer. And we used to listen to the radio. It kept telling us all the time about what was happening in Germany, and then when they came to the thing that they were burning books and things like this, and then when they started burning the Bibles, that became the ultimatum that something had to be done. I'm sure that a lot of people in the United States were expecting the same thing.
So what? So you and your brother decided to go into the Army. Now, everybody that's, of course, we're Army here, but tell us, why did you choose that particular service?
Well, that was the closest one. We went to Fort Riley, Kansas to enlist into the military service, and of course, naturally, you go to Fort Riley, you're going to enlist in the Army.
Gotcha. Now, let me ask you this. So you were kind of taken by the events of the day, were you?
You know, when I went down to enlist, my brother was, well, actually they started the selective service in 1940,
right.
1940.
Right.
And my brother said he wasn't going to be drafted, he was going to volunteer. And that was natural, you know, for most Americans in those days anyway. And I said, well, I'm going to go with you. So I went with him, and then when I got there, well, they sent me back home to get my dad and mother's signature.
Now, how old were you at that point?
I was 19.
and they still wanted to know because of your.
Oh, yeah, well, anybody under 21 couldn't smoke, drink, or listen to military service without their parents' signatures.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And so anyway, when I asked my dad and mom to sign, my dad said, "What do you sign?" But my mother said, "I only sign on one condition, that you promise to be a Christian soldier." I was a little bit taken back by it because I knew we were Christians, and we tried to go to church regularly, but out on the farm it's kind of hard to do when you have to go 6 miles to go to church or something like that in the wintertime and things. But we always did our best, and when we didn't go to church, my dad used to read the Bible on Sundays to us.
Right.
Then when I looked at my mother's eyes after she told me that, she had tears in them, and it really stuck with me the rest of my life. And every time I thought I was doing something that she wouldn't approve of, I naturally remembered her, and I wasn't going to dishonor her, and above all, I wasn't going to dishonor God because of stuff like this.
Well, let's step into this one thing. What date did you finally go into the service?
4th, 1940.
So October 4th, 1940. Now, America wasn't at war at that point, were they?
No.
And so it was just something that you felt compelled to do with your brother.
No,
you go.
They were going to. It started the selective service, so we knew that.
Oh, so you were going to get drafted no matter what. Anyway, when did they start that? What year was that?
We were going to get drafted, but
early 1940s when they started the draft.
No, it was around around September, I think. Or
September.
October, yeah.
So it wasn't much after.
Draftees that came into our unit was after we had enlisted in the military services. So it was in late October when we got a bunch of draftees, and they told us that they're going to use the 7th Division instead of being a mechanized outfit that it was supposed to be when we enlisted, that they were going to train selective service people, and they transferred all the regular Army men, and my brother and I were regular Army, so they transferred us out to the 3rd Infantry Division, who wanted regular Army people.
Now let me ask you this. Wait a minute. I want to get on this important stuff here. When you got drafted regular Army, how many years was that commitment at that point? You remember?
3 years.
So was it 3 years?
For 3 years.
It was for 3 years.
3 years in the duration. They told us that ahead of time because they were pretty sure we were probably going to go to war.
So they were pretty sure it was going to go to war. Now, okay, I'm trying to get all these timelines tied in together because I think it's for the span of history, it's kind of important.
Right.
Between October 4th of 1940, when you went into the service, and December 7th, 1941, when we were attacked by the Empire of Japan, what were you doing? What training did you have, and what were you up to?
When I enlisted, it was in the 17th Infantry Regiment of the 7th Division, and that was at Fort Ord, California. And then they took us out of there because the 7th Division was selected to train the selective service people. And then we went, like we were in Company K of the 17th Infantry Regiment. We went to Company K of the 3rd.
Well, help us out here. What kind of skills were you learning?
Infantry skills.
All right, so you learned how to fire. In those days, it was a Springfield 03.
03 and the 45 Colt revolver and the 45 automatic revolver and
some hand grenades.
We learned how to use hand grenades and things like this, but we didn't have many of those weapons. And so when we got after
was that the days when they were using kind of cardboard guns and things because they didn't have any?
Actually, at Fort Ord we didn't have that, but when we got transferred to the Company K of the 30th Infantry Regiment, which was then at Presidio, San Francisco, we still were doing amphibious training, things like this, but then they called the regiment to Fort Lewis, Washington, and that was sometime in the first part of 1941.
So where were you on December 7th, 1941? I got to know that.
I was on top of Mount Rainier. And
what were you doing on the top of the mountain?
My brother and I and a couple other guys, we were going to go skiing, and we'd never been skiing before because we came from Kansas and never been on a hill over 200 feet high in our lives before.
Sure.
And we were strapping on these skis when they announced on the radio at the ski shack that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and the message came out that everyone in the military service should immediately return to the military service that was actually on active duty, you know. So we took off our skis, and when I looked down that mountain, it was 8,000 feet down, and I figured, well, that was probably the first day of my life I was saved by the war.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I wanted to ask you, though, is in basic training, everybody that's ever been in the military always complained about their sergeants and the people that gave them training. Were they pretty tough guys that trained you in those days?
You know, we had some old sergeants that were old-timers, you know. And
from the first war, huh?
Right, well, I don't know what they were in the first war, but they'd been in the military service 8, 10 years and things like that.
Sure.
They had a lot of time in already. And they were tough. I remember one guy, his name was Russ Saunders, and I think he was a Russian. But anyway, he was very, he was our platoon sergeant, and he was very rough on us. He'd make us set at attention and do double time and everything else if we goofed off.
Well, how'd you do in basic in second 8 weeks, or how long did they have second 8 weeks in?
The basic was done partially at Presidio, Monterey, and then at Camp Ward, California.
Right.
And
did you find that easier to do, or was it tough?
I found it, well, it wasn't tough for, not for us farm boys, it wasn't tough, but it was monotony, and it was dusty, and it was dirty, and we just didn't care very much about the routine, you know.
Right. Okay, so now you're back. You are stationed at this point up in Fort Lewis, Washington, as I think we got that part going. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, December 7th comes. What's the first action that you had to...
Well, the first thing we did, we returned to camp, of course. And when we got back to camp, then they decided to move us out of Fort Lewis, out into the hills, out into the rainforest and places like that up there.
Because they're afraid the Japanese might attack.
The Japanese were going to attack it. And then they got the order to send a regiment up to be at the Air Force base at Bellingham, Washington.
Right.
And so we went up there and we stood guard up there for a while. And when the things didn't look like the Japanese were going to continue their invasion on up through the islands to the you know, Washington and places like the main part of the United States, they took us back down to the Fort Lewis, and then we went on our amphibious maneuvers and things.
Okay, but let's get to the first big motion from the action here. Now it's what do you remember? What month and year you were moving out of Fort Lewis and all those different training exercises and off on an actual adventure?
Well, actually, from 41 on, we were in heavy amphibious training, jiu-jitsu training and all that kind of stuff, and bayonet training, and we were training for jungle fighting, because we went out and we did maneuvers out in the range.
Well, you thought you were going to go fight the Japanese.
We thought we were going to go to the Pacific anyway.
Right. So what was I'm just trying to get a month and year now out of you for when, if you can remember, when you're going to go to the European theater or headed that direction.
That would be through the whole summer, and of course the whole summer was involved in our amphibious training up and down the coast.
Okay, I guess from what we discovered, you saw some type of action in was it in Sicily? Is that correct?
Oh, no, we aren't there yet.
Okay, but I'm just.
Actually, you know, they put us on a train to Fort Ord and they sent us across the country to Camp Pickett, Virginia, and of course that was the worst place that we ever served in our lifetime, because it was so rainy and muddy, and the old clay mud would pick up.
Well, some guys at Fort Polk, Louisiana probably can test that.
That's right, I'm sure they could. And so when we got on the boats there, they gave us French translation books, and of course being kind of naive about